Psalm 89 reminds God of his steadfast faithfulness. Chesed and emeth are the Hebrew words that usually are the roots of the words translated faithfulness, steadfast love, kindness of God. Reminds God that he made a covenant with David to establish his throne forever. We haven't read that yet in 1st or 2nd Samuel, but it ultimately happens. And yet then, the psalmist reminds him that the people are suffering. Apparently, this is during the Babylonian captivity, which is when Isaiah 65 would have been written or would have been describing. The people feel that their punishment is ongoing and undue, and that God has abandoned them and his covenant with them. And yet, in Isaiah 65, God sort of answers this in a way. It's not a direct answer to Psalm 89, but in a way, the Lord is reminding Israel why they're in the state they're in, because of how unfaithful they have been. They complain that he lacks faithfulness to them, but he points out their lack of faithfulness to him. And yet he promises that there will be a remnant, and that this remnant will not only return, but that there will be a kind of new heaven and new earth where there will be no suffering, a sort of apocalyptic vision of something beyond the end of time, perhaps. Revelations in the New Testament, the book of Revelations, picks up on this. But I want to talk about Hebrews because I think in a way, the short reading from Hebrews today can help us understand what's going on in Psalm 89 and in Isaiah 65. Because the Jews have complained that they're suffering, and the Christians complain of that, apparently, to the author of the Epistle to the Hebrews. The Christian Hebrews complain of that, and all Christians would. We do today. The author says it is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you are left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Being disciplined is a sign, in other words, that you are legitimately God's heir and that he loves you. Besides this, he continues, we have had earthly fathers to discipline us and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, our earthly fathers, at their pleasure. But he, God, disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. He disciplines us for our good, that we may share his holiness. That's the point. It's not necessarily even taking Isaiah 65 or the book of Revelations literally and expecting a revitalized planet Earth where there is no longer suffering. I would suggest that that's a symbol that externalizes an inward disposition of holiness. Suffering produces holiness, sanctity, likeness to God. At least it should, if it's taken in the right spirit. So in a way, Paul, or the author of Hebrews, is answering both Isaiah 65 and Psalm 89, because those Psalm 89 and Isaiah 65 are just two examples of this theme that runs through all of the Old Testament, of the people complaining of their suffering and God reminding them that they're suffering because they've done wrong. And here, Hebrews, the author, reminding them that they're suffering for the sake of holiness. For the moment, all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant. Later, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. The peaceful fruit of righteousness. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather healed. Make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. In other words, when you're healed, you are now lame. You have now been laid low disciplined by God. You can't even walk anymore, metaphorically speaking, but God will heal you. And so you'd better get ready to walk in a straight line, a straight path, a straight way. This to me seems to be really what's going on, so that we may bear the fruits, the peaceful fruit of righteousness. We are being disciplined and we are suffering now. And so, students, when you suffer, and some of you will suffer far more than I have, even at your age. I know there's a lot of anxiety, angst, depression, people doing bad things to you. Even when you suffer, realize that a good can come from it, the peaceful fruit of righteousness. Even if you're suffering unjustly, even if you're not suffering as the people of God were because they had done wrong, nevertheless, it's God's way of somehow healing you and giving you the grace to participate in his own suffering. He took on this suffering and discipline himself in the incarnation and the crucifixion. So he's not asking us to do what he himself has not done and is not willing to continue to do.